Well, Desiree, very chilling details about what is alleged to have transpired at what was supposed to be massage parlors that were run by Gerhard Ackerman. Yesterday we heard chilling details, voice notes, as well as some WhatsApp messages that were read out inside court, which clearly indicated to some transactions that were being made, explicit videos that had been sent to some clients, and how basically Gerhard Ackerman had fixed the prices of these alleged massages that had taken place, and how he even charged more from extras, which would include some sexual activity that had taken place. Underaged boys, we're hearing inside this court this morning. One of the boys had been 15 years and about 11 months at the time that these acts had taken place. How some of the parents were lied to by Ackerman in trying to woo their children to Johannesburg under the pretext that they would make some money and earn an honest living. Some of the, the WhatsApp messages, as well as those voice notes, Desiree, too explicit to even run on television. How some of the private parts of these young boys had been described to these adult male clients in order for them to fork out monies and perform these sexual acts on these boys. Gerhard Ackerman has maintained that he did not give any instructions to any of these young boys to perform any sexual acts on the clients, but certainly what we saw yesterday, the state hammering him on this, proving through a flurry of these voice messages, as well as the WhatsApp messages as well, that in fact he had even given, when asked by one of the clients if he was willing or he could provide someone who would be able to have sex with one of the clients, he said that he would arrange this. Now, this is in stark contrast to what he told this court, where he said he had never given any instructions that any of the young children perform any sexual acts on the clients. These WhatsApp messages, as well as the voice notes, certainly point to a stark contrast to what he told this court. We also saw the judge, get quite irritated by some of his demeanor inside the court, in which, he accused Ackerman of failing, of not wanting to answer certain questions, pointing out that the state at some point in its closing arguments, which of course would be at a later stage, would even argue that he was somewhat an invasive witness in this aspect. He was a bit earlier on today, the state, which is still cross-examining him, saying that, he did not want the parents of these young boys to know what was going on. In one of the messages that were retrieved from his phone by investigators, Gerhard Ackerman, through those messages, is seen basically telling one of the clients that one of the boys had told his parents that he was taking videos, and how that was basically a problem in this instance. So he was questioned about why he believed this would be a problem, because he had essentially lied to some of the parents of these victims about what the boys were coming to do in Johannesburg. Really chilling details about how Ackerman had basically wooed these young boys to Johannesburg, and the acts that they were due to perform here. One of the alleged victims basically describing much earlier in evidence about how terrified he was. We're also hearing now that one of the boys wanted to leave, and he was then told by Ackerman that where would he get the money, basically. So the state in this instance basically saying that Ackerman had played on the vulnerability of these young boys, their circumstances as well, given that they had come from homes that were not doing well off, and basically played on how young they were, luring them to Johannesburg for a better life, which was not to be. We also heard in court this morning, you'd recall, that all the evidence, that was given, or the testimony that was given by these young boys, was done in camera over the past couple of days. But we're hearing from the judge here today, because Gerhard Ackerman maintains that any sexual conduct that may have taken place would have been an agreement between the young boys and the clients. But the judge also interjecting today, saying, how does he expect the court to believe that, given that in the evidence or the testimony of one of the boys, he talked about how his life had been ruined by Gerhard Ackerman and basically apologized to his father for what then had essentially taken place. Of course, we were not part of that testimony. It was held in camera due to the sensitive nature of this involving children as well at the time that these incidents had taken place and the graphic nature of their testimony. So what we're expecting to take place here today, Desiree, is that we're expecting the cross-examination of Gerhard Ackerman to possibly be concluded by the state. We're not sure whether the defense will re-examine, but there certainly doesn't seem to be an indication of that at this stage. Then possibly we might have a postponement in this matter for closing arguments. We don't know when that is going to take place, but certainly this is one of those stories that has certainly sent shockwaves through South Africa. One of the other important points, just to make, Desiree, before you let me go, is that Gerhard Ackerman at some point had been operating his massage parlor in Sandton, and he says he'd basically made about 800 Rand a day from that. But he told this court that his rental had been in the range of over some 30,000 Rand. So the judge questioning then, how much would you have made on a monthly basis? He said about 24,000. This court questioning that, because if his rent then had been well over 30,000 and he had been making a little over 20,000 Rand from the activities that had been taking place in that house, how was he then making ends meet? So those are some of the contradictions that have been picked up inside what he told this court versus what the state has been pointing to, that essentially Gerhard Ackerman is not a reliable witness. He has been evasive, and this is certainly something that we will hear the state argue in its closing arguments, and we'll probably hear of when the date will be set for those closing arguments before we adjourn at this court this morning.
The other thing we're told, the judge brought up, Griselda, and you can correct me here if I'm wrong, is the word that we're using in our introduction today, talking about him being called a salesman. And we're told this is a word that was brought up by the judge, saying to Gerhard Ackerman, you might as well just admit you were selling young boys, you were a salesman.
That's right. Those were sentiments that were shared by the judge yesterday, Desiree, during proceedings, because according to these voice notes, as well as the WhatsApp messages that were retrieved from Ackerman's phone, he would describe very explicitly, we've had to beep out several of the words that he used to describe these young boys. I could possibly say, he would explain how, and I must apologize to the viewers, he would explain how tight these young boys were on their buttocks. And he would also describe their private parts, how big or how small they were and how attractive they were. In order to woo some of these clients, you would recall that the acting judge, Paul Kennedy, died by suicide. His name has come up in these proceedings several times as one of the individuals who videos and WhatsApps were sent to. And a number of these young boys were described, in what they looked like to Paul Kennedy, who died by suicide, of course, and now you only have Ackerman, who was inside the dock. But the judge basically saying that Ackerman was the salesman here. He was the one, even when clients had asked for some of the pictures of the boys, he would describe it in such a way that would be enticing to these clients, and it basically sold these boys off to adult males to be raped.